Wait! Before we start, do you want a bundle of 30 printable English PDF cheat sheets? Teaching you words and phrases for conversations for free? Then click the link in the description and sign up for a free lifetime account to get access. Hi everybody, my name is Alicia. In this video, I'm going to look at how to use the preposition to. Let's get started. Okay, first I want to talk about using the preposition to express a destination. So we use to when expressing the end point or the destination of a movement. So we can use this form of to when we talk about our travel experiences or just when we are talking about moving inside a room, moving inside our community, and so on. So let's take a look at how we use to in this situation. First, she went to the bank. Here, to is before the destination. In this case, the bank. She went to the bank. The bank is the destination or the end point of her movement. We use this with the past tense verb. Next example is they drove to Mexico. They drove to Mexico. In this case, the destination or the end point is a country, Mexico. We put to before the end point here to mark this. Again, we have a movement verb in this sentence. So here we have drove, the past tense of drive. Our first example was went, the past tense of go. Let's look at one more example of this. Let's move this meeting to a coffee shop. Let's move this meeting to a coffee shop. So this is an expression we can use if we want to stop having a meeting somewhere and go somewhere else to continue talking. Here we have the destination or the desired, in this case, end point, a coffee shop here. So this person is making a suggestion. This is not a past tense example, but they're saying, let's move to this destination. So they're talking about a destination in the future. So we can use to before a specific endpoint for our movement. Please keep in mind you cannot use the word there in this case. Sometimes I see learners say, I want to go to there, or I lived to there, or I went to there. So we cannot use there in this position because there is not a specific endpoint. We always use a specific location at the end of this to phrase, okay? So make sure you mark those endpoints with to. Okay, let's continue to the second one. Number 2 is for recipients. Recipients. So that means we use to mark the person receiving something. So in a give and receive situation, when you want to express the person who takes the thing or who receives the thing, you can mark that person with to. Let's look at some examples. Okay, first one. Please send this file to the client. Please send this file to the client. In this case, the client is the person or the group that is receiving the file. Please send this file to the client. If it helps you, you can think of this person as the destination for something. It has kind of the same feel. That's the end point or the end person for the item. So please send this file to the client. Next one. I gave my sweater to my mother. I gave my sweater to my mother. Again, my mother is the recipient of this object, my sweater. I gave my sweater to my mother. So this is one kind of example sentence. There are other ways to talk about giving and receiving. For example, I gave my mother my sweater is also 100% correct. It's just that this is a different pattern that you can use to express this giving and receiving situation. Okay, last example. Take your application to the manager. Take your application to the manager. So again, we have our recipient here. So in the future, this person is going to take their application to this destination person, the manager in this case. So we use to mark the person who receives something or who is going to receive something. They're kind of the end person or the end point person. Okay, let's continue on to number 3 here. So number 1 and number 2 were really about marking endpoints with people and places. Number 3 is about marking an endpoint with time. So we use this a lot when we talk about our schedules. Let's look at a couple of examples and then we'll expand on this a little bit. First, the meeting is 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. The meeting is 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Here, 2 is before 3 p.m. It marks the end point for the meeting, okay? So we put 2 before the end time of something. Let's look at one more example. Her lectures are 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Her lectures are 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Again, we have 2 before the end point, the end time for the lecture. So this is a very, very common use of 2. We use this all the time. I want to mention we often use this form of to with from. So from and to are often used as a pair to talk about the start point and the end point. So we use from before the start point and to before the end point. For example, the movie is from 6:30 to 8. The movie is from 6:30 to 8. From marks the start point, to marks the end point. One more example. I work from 9 to 5. I work from 9 to 5. Again, from is before the start point and to is before the end point. So we always use this pattern when we talk about end points. We cannot swap the two. We need to use to before the end time. Okay, great. Let's move on to number 4 then. Number 4 also talks about an end point. We also use to refer to an end point, but this is in terms of like a maximum of something. When we talk about a range of numbers or a range of time periods, for example, when we want to talk about the last possible of something or the maximum of something, we use to do that. So let's look at these examples. First, we can accept 8 to 10 people for the event. We can accept 8 to 10 people. 8 to 10. This gives us a range of possible people. So minimum is 8 people, maximum is 10 people. Inside this range is acceptable for us. So 2 marks the maximum in this case, the maximum in our range. Okay, let's look at the second example. The meeting will be finished in 5 to 10 minutes. The meeting will be finished in 5 to 10 minutes. Again, we have a range here, 5 to 10 minutes. So when you are trying to estimate the end point of your meeting, you probably are going to use an expression like this, maybe 10 to 20 minutes. Or when you're talking about a project you're working on, it'll be finished in maybe, I don't know, 1 to 2 days. You can use this to before the end point or the maximum point for your range. So this is a very, very, very useful use of to. So 5 to 10 minutes gives us the rough start point and the maximum point for our range, the end of our range. Okay, one more. It can take 2 to 3 weeks to review job applications. It can take 2 to 3 weeks to review job applications. So again, we have our range here, from 2, maybe about 2, until the maximum point in our range is 3. So again, we use 2 before that maximum end of our range point. Okay, great. So we use all of these, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are referring to some kind of end point or some kind of destination in terms of a place or in terms of a person or in terms of a time. Okay, so with this in our minds, let's continue on to some different uses. This side of the board has some kind of different uses that are important to talk about, and these are a little bit more, I guess, conceptual than the first 4 points we talked about. So first, number 5, we use to express purpose. It has the meaning of in order to do something. So we often reduce this in order to just to. So let's look at some examples so you can see what this looks like. First, I went to the store to get milk. I went to the store to get milk. So here we have this first preposition. I went to the store, right? Our destination. So there's first to here is our destination to. Then we have this purpose marking to get milk. This one tells us the purpose of our travels, right? I traveled to the store, or I went to the store in order to get milk. So this one is a purpose to. How do you know when it's a purpose to or a travel to, or I don't know? A good hint is that there's some kind of information at the beginning of the sentence. There's some kind of travel like we see here, I went to the store. There's something that's already happening there, and then we have extra information about the reason that happened. So let's look at our second example. He bought a truck to drive to work. He bought a truck to drive to work. Here again, we have a simple past tense statement, right? He bought a truck. And then to drive to work. To drive to work. So he bought a truck in order to drive to work. So this expresses the reason he bought the truck. We use to do this. We do not use for. He bought a truck for drive to work would be incorrect. You may see some for driving patterns, like for plus the ing form. You may see that. He bought a truck for driving for his job or something like that. You might see those kinds of patterns. But we cannot put to and that ing form together, and we cannot put for and drive together. We cannot mix these two, to drive or for driving, but we cannot mix them. Okay, let's look at one more example. She got a part-time job to earn some extra money. She got a part-time job to earn some extra money. Again, we have a simple past tense statement. She got a part-time job. Why? In order to earn some money. So when you see this extra information, this reason for doing something, we use to after, generally like a past tense statement, at least in these examples. We use this to plus that extra information to express the purpose of the situation. Okay, so just keep in mind that yes, there are some cases where you can use to plus that infinitive form or for plus the gerund form, but we cannot mix those two different grammar patterns. So please be careful of that. Sometimes I see that. Okay, let's move on to the last part, just some other uses. So I mentioned this just now, the infinitive verb form. The infinitive verb form is just the base verb form, the form of the verb you see in the dictionary if you look up a word in the dictionary. So we use the infinitive form with to see, or to buy, to go, or to talk. So when you are doing grammar practice or grammar studies, when you see infinitive form or infinitive verb form, it refers to this kind of base form of the verb, to plus the verb. So we use this sometimes in grammar patterns, like we just saw here, to talk about the purpose. So when you see infinitive verb form, that means the to verb form, okay? Another use I want to talk about is just with set expressions. So set expressions can mean idioms, it can mean phrasal verbs, and so on. There are lots and lots and lots of phrasal verbs and expressions that use to, but they are different from these expressions and these uses that I talked about in this lesson. So I wanted to cover a few that maybe could cause some confusion because they seem similar to points number 3 and 4 in today's lesson. So a few set expressions I want to talk about are from time to time, from A to Z, and from person to person. So what do these mean? You see this similar from to pattern here, right? But it's not like a start point and end point, really. So what does this mean? You might see people say from time to time. This expression means sometimes or occasionally. Like, I like to go to the movies from time to time. This just means sometimes. It's a casual way of saying sometimes. This expression, from A to Z, you might think, what? Is this about the alphabet? This is when we're talking about a range of something. So we use this expression, from A to Z, when we want to express that someone can do everything, or that someone is good at a wide range of things. So for example, oh, that tech company, they have so many products, they have everything covered from A to Z. That means that that company, that technology company, can do a lot of different things. So A to Z generally means that they can do everything in like a certain field or in about a certain topic and so on. So you might see from A to Z used. Lastly, from person to person, from person to person. So in this expression, I have person to person, but you may see this used in terms of groups of people, like from community to community, or from city to city, or from country to country, and so on. These usually are used to talk about differences between people, differences between places, countries, maybe languages, and so on. So an example sentence with this one might be something like, opinions are different from person to person. So this means that each person has a different opinion in this example sentence. So this from person to person, or this from noun to noun, where the noun is the same here, refers to usually differences, or maybe just kind of slight differences even in each of those situations or each of those people. So these are a few set expressions that might be a little bit confusing when you see them the first time because they seem to follow this pattern, but they do have some specific uses. And of course, as I said, there are many, many phrasal verbs that use to and other prepositions, but it's not possible to cover all the phrasal verbs in one video. So I wanted to introduce these uses of to in this lesson. So that is it for this lesson. I hope that you got some good information about how and when to use to. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, or if you want to practice making some example sentences with to, please feel free to do so in the comment section of this video. Also, don't forget, if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And also check us out at EnglishClass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. Thanks very much for watching this lesson, and I will see you again soon. Bye! Hi everybody, my name is Alicia. In this video, I'm going to talk about 8 ways to use the preposition for. Let's get started. Okay, the first use is purpose. So we use for to express the purpose or the use of something. We can use this to talk about places, the purpose of a place, the purpose of an object, and so on. So let's look at some examples. First, this textbook is for my science class. So here, for is before my science class. In this sentence, this textbook, our subject, matches with my science class. So we show that the use or the purpose of the textbook, the thing that the textbook is used for, or the thing that the textbook is used to do, is my science class. In this case, we're not talking about an action, we're talking about an object and the thing the object is used for, the thing that the object is used to do. So in this case, to study for my science class. Okay, let's look at another example. The conference room is for meetings. So here we have for before meetings. This shows the purpose of the conference room is meetings. This is another way to understand this sentence. Again, we have our subject here, the conference room, and the part following for, which shows the use of the subject. So we can kind of think of these two parts of these sentences as kind of a pair, kind of matching. So the thing and the thing that it is used to do. Okay, one more. Here's an idea for a new product. Here's an idea for a new product. So this sentence is expressing a new product as like the purpose of the idea. So we can think of this in like brainstorming sessions as well. So when you think of, in this case, a new idea or a new concept, you are sharing your concept and the purpose of that concept at the same time. So here's an idea for a new product. So this is expressing the purpose of the idea or the use of the idea in this case. So these are some different ways that we express the purpose or the use of something with for. Okay, let's continue to the second use of for this lesson. The second use is duration. So duration means length of time. Let's look at the examples here. First, he has lived here for 6 years. He has lived here for 6 years. So please note, when you use this for, you need to use the plural form of the, in this case, years that follows. So when we use our time measurement, like year or hour, minute, second, and so on, we need to use the plural form here, as long as it's not one. Of course, if it's 1 year, we need to use just the singular form. But generally, we need to use the plural form in sentences like these that express a duration of time, a length of time. So we cannot use to here. He has lived here 6 years is incorrect. For is used to talk about the length of time. Let's look at the next example sentence. They talked for 2 hours. They talked for 2 hours. Again, we have for before our duration, our length of time, and we're using the plural form, 2 hours. Okay, so they talked for 2 hours. This means their discussion was a 2-hour time period. That was the duration of their talk. Okay, one more example of this. We waited for about 15 minutes. We waited for about 15 minutes. Here we have for before about 15 minutes. So if you want to make a guess or express something close to this time, you can use about in this position. Don't put about before this. We waited about for 15 minutes. No, don't do that. Put it before the duration of time. We waited for about 15 minutes is perfect. So we can use for to talk about duration as well. It's usually very clear when we are using for to describe duration because there's this kind of length of time expression after the preposition. Okay, great. So let's continue to the next use of for. The next use of for, number 3, describes a status or a condition. We use this for a lot when we want to express an emotion that we feel but for someone else. So sometimes we feel, happy or sad or excited about someone else's news, and we use for to express that. So let's break down these example sentences. First one, very, very common expression. I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for you. So this sentence means I feel very, very happy because of something that happened in your life. So we do not use to express this. Sometimes I see learners say something like, I'm so happy to you, but we do not express it in this way. We say, I'm so happy for you. You got a new job? I'm so happy for you. So expressing with for you shows that you care about the other person's condition or status. You have this emotion and you want to express it for that other person. Use for to do that. Let's look at another example of this. This is great news for the company. This is great news for the company. So again, we have kind of this status or this condition. Something happened. This is great news for the company. So in this case, we want to express this condition is true for this organization in this case. So maybe the CEO says this, this is great news for the company. So this means that this condition or this status is something that we want to make clear is for this, kind of the destination of this feeling or this condition is the company. So it's not me, but it's the company. I feel this way, but it's about the company. So we use for to do this. Again, not to. This is great news for the company. Okay, one more example of this. The lecture was hard for the students to understand. The lecture was hard for the students to understand. So in this situation, here is kind of the status or the condition, maybe the opinion in this case. The lecture was hard. And here we have for the students. So that means in this case, maybe the lecture was not hard for the professor, or the lecture was not hard for the teacher. But we want to, again, show this condition should be applied to this group, in this case, the students. The lecture was hard for the students to understand. Maybe the lecture was easy for another professor to understand, but we want to focus on this group here. We use for to do that. The lecture was hard for the students to understand. So again, this use number 3 to express a status or condition is something that we do when we want to express an opinion or a condition or an emotion, and we want to be specific about the person or the organization or the group of people that we want to apply that emotion to or that condition to. Okay, so with that in mind, let's continue on to number 4. We're going to change the feel a lot with number 4. Number 4 is old-fashioned because. So yes, this is an old-fashioned use, and we don't use this so much in everyday communication. However, you may see this and you may hear this in media and in stories. It is still used, especially in older stories that are still very, very famous stories. So let's take a look at some examples and see how this is used. So first one is a sad one, but he remembers that day, for it was a sad day. He remembers that day, for it was a sad day. In this sentence, we can replace for with because, and the sentence stays the same.
He remembers that day because it was a sad day. Okay, so here for 100% replaces because, but the difference is that this sentence sounds much more old-fashioned. We would not say this sentence in everyday communication now unless we want to express a kind of old-fashioned or maybe very dramatic feel. So this is 100% the same meaning, but just sounds older. Let's look at another example. They walked home quickly, for the night was cold and dark. So here we have, they walked home quickly, for the night was cold and dark. Again, we can just replace for with because, and the sentence is the same. They walked home quickly because the night was cold and dark. This is a much more natural sentence in today's modern English, but using for here makes it sound older, much older. Okay, last example. She went into the town, for she had many errands to attend to. She went into the town, for she had many errands to attend to. Again, exactly the same as because. She went into the town because she had many errands to attend to. So I wanted to include this because even though we don't use it so much in everyday communication now, we do still see this from time to time, and you might think, for? Is this about purpose here? And this expresses the same meaning as because. So if you like watching old movies, you might hear this expression quite often, so keep an ear out for it. And of course, if you like to read old books, you will probably see this a lot. So that's what it means. Okay, let's continue to number 5. Number 5, I think, is a pretty easy one to understand. We use for to express the recipient of something, the person who gets something or the person who receives something. So let's look at the examples here. The boy drew a picture for his mother. The boy drew a picture for his mother. So here for comes before his mother. She is the person who received the picture. So it's like saying the reason someone did something is for giving it to this person or in order to give it to this person. We describe the recipient with for, or we preface the recipient with for. Next example, I bought this coffee for you. I bought this coffee for you. So again, we have for the person receiving. So in this case, the coffee. Oh, I bought this coffee. Okay, great. For you. So we can do this to express who is receiving something. One more. Flowers for me? How nice. So we can also do this to talk about ourselves when we receive something. In this case, the person receives some flowers. Flowers for me. So that's this part right here is expressing, oh my gosh, I'm the recipient of the flowers. We're expressing some surprise here with this. For me, oh my gosh, how nice. So we do use this for to express the recipients of things. This is just one way to express this giving and receiving type of pattern. Of course, there are many ways to express that someone gave something or received something. This is just one pattern you can use to talk about this giving-receiving relationship. Okay, great. Let's continue on to number 6. Number 6 is also, I think, a pretty easy one to understand quickly because it uses numbers. We use for to express prices and rates and sales and discounts, these kinds of things. So let's look at some examples. First one, I got this shirt for $20. I got this shirt for $20. For is before the price of the item. In this case, I got this shirt for $20. Another way to say this is, I bought this shirt and the price was $20. But for $20 is a very quick and short way to say it. Yeah? Okay, let's look at the next example. This is an example of a discount expression. The electronics store is having a 2-for-1 sale. The electronics store is having a 2-for-1 sale. Here is the for I want to focus on. This is an expression that you might see in any kind of store you can imagine, actually. A 2-for-1 sale, maybe 3-for-1, I don't know. But this means you can get 2 objects, in this case markers, in this example, 2 for the price of 1. So this means if a marker costs $1, you can get 2 markers for $1. So you can buy 2 items for the price of 1 item. We express this very quickly with 2 for 1 or 3 for 1 and so on. So this expresses the price of an item or the discount rate in this case. Okay, let's look at one more example. The hotel gave us bags for free. The hotel gave us bags for free. So when something costs $0, when something costs nothing, we express that with free, right? Something is free. When you want to talk about something you received for no money, you use for to do that. We got this for free. She got that for free. So use for to describe those things that cost nothing as well. So you can use for in this way to talk about prices, rates, sales, and so on. Okay, great. Let's move on to the last 2 points for this lesson. The last 2 points I want to talk about are kind of more grammatically focused. So it's not so much about the meaning, but rather the grammatical purpose of the preposition. So we use the preposition for with gerund. So if you don't know what a gerund is, that's when you take a verb, you take the verb and you use it in the ing form, but you use it as a noun. When we do this, we use for before that word. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Let's look at some examples. Here's one. This part of the computer is for storing data. This part of the computer is for storing data. Here we have for plus storing. Storing, so to store means to keep something, like in a computer, data in a computer. So we use this for ing pattern. You might also know the infinitive pattern, something, something, something to verb. That's a very common thing that we maybe run into questions about. Should I use the infinitive form? Should I use the gerund form? And one error I sometimes see is learners try to mix the two. They say like, for store data or to storing data, something like that. So the rule is please use for with gerund. So don't try to mix like for store or to storing, something like that. Make sure when you're using the gerund form here, you precede it with for. Let's look at another example. A sharp knife is important for cutting vegetables. A sharp knife is important for cutting vegetables. So here is my gerund for cutting vegetables. And we have for before this, okay? So a sharp knife is important for cutting vegetables. So another point that I want to make is that we can sometimes use either the gerund form or the infinitive form. And depending on the verb, we can choose between the two. Sometimes both are totally fine to use. Sometimes you need to use one or the other. And in those cases, in the cases where you can choose either one, it's up to you. But you kind of may tend to notice that these sentences are they have kind of the feeling of explaining something to someone. So we maybe don't use these so much unless we want to kind of teach someone how to do something, or we're describing the steps in a process like these two. We're teaching someone about computer maybe building or something like that. Or in this one, we're talking about how to cook something, or maybe basic cooking techniques. So you might find that these are used a little bit more when we're instructing someone. So it's a little bit more professional maybe, or a little bit more polite. So depending on the situation, you may also hear some different people making different choices with their grammar. But just be aware of the differences between the two, and that sometimes we can use both the gerund form or the infinitive form. Anyway, let's continue to the last one. GPS tags are used for tracking wild animals. GPS tags are used for tracking wild animals. Here's tracking, for tracking. So tracking, to track something, means to regularly check the position of something. Like on your phone, right? You can do GPS tracking of your position, hopefully at any time. So GPS tags are used for tracking wild animals. Again, we have kind of this feeling that someone is explaining something new to us with this sentence. So this is one very, very common use of for. Again, this is a more grammatically focused use of for, so we don't need to think about it so much like a specific meaning, but a general feel that we have when we're using it in front of a gerund is that we're talking about the use of something, and we're kind of explaining that use of something, sometimes to someone who's learning for the first time. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go to our last very quick point, number 8. I wanted to include some questions, some key questions that use for to ask about the purpose of something. So, for example, this is a very common one. What for? What for? This question means why? So for example, if someone asks you for something really strange, like they say, hey, can you buy me a drill at the store? You might think, what for? So a drill is something that you use for construction projects. And you might think, what? Why? Another way to ask that question is, what for? This is kind of like saying, what is the purpose of that thing? Or for what purpose do you need that thing? So these are different ways that we can ask that why question. It's also kind of like saying, what are your plans for that object? So if someone asks you for something surprising, you can respond with, what for? So you want to know more about what they're going to do. So there are a couple of other patterns that we commonly use this with. So generally, you might hear this what something something for type question, and we can substitute a couple of different phrases in the middle here. But I want to introduce two that are very, very common. The first one that follows this pattern is, what do you need that for? What do you need that for? So again, in the drill example, it's like, what do you need that for? So what is the reason that this is necessary for you? You're asking for the purpose, some kind of explanation. And another one, a past tense one, what did you do that for? What did you do that for? So in this case, it's a past tense thing. We're surprised by someone's actions. What did you do that for? Tell me the purpose of that action. What was the purpose of that action? So you might see these what something something for questions, and these are asking for a reason or a purpose for something. So this is another way to use for. All right, that is everything that I want to cover in this lesson. We talked about many different meanings, and we also looked at some grammatical uses of the word for. So I hope that you got a good refresher about how to use this preposition. But of course, if you have any questions or comments, or if you want to practice making some example sentences, please feel free to do so in the comment section of this video. Also, don't forget to like this lesson and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, check us out at EnglishClass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. Thanks very much for watching this lesson, and I will see you again soon. Bye! Hi everybody, my name is Alicia. In this video, I'm going to talk about 6 ways to use the word as. Let's get started. Okay, the first use I want to talk about is to show the role or the purpose of someone or something. We often use this as before job titles or other roles in our community, in our company, or in an organization. We can also use this as to express the way we use something or the purpose of something. Let's look at some examples. First, a job example. He's been working as a salesman for about 6 years. He's been working as a salesman. So this as comes before the job title. And in this case, we have our article before salesman. He's been working as a salesman for about 6 years. So we do this to show the person's role. We do the same thing in our second example sentence. She was hired as the new creative director. She was hired as the new creative director. So in this case, we have as the new creative director. So this is the job title, creative director, and we have new to show it's a new position or a new role. We also have the here. So the shows that there's just one creative director. She was hired as the new creative director. As comes before all of this. This is one phrase expressing this new role. Okay, now let's look at this use of as to talk about a purpose. So this room can be used as a meeting room or as a break room. This room can be used as a meeting room or as a break room. So in this case, we are talking about the purpose of a room. So a multi-purpose room. We can use this room for many different things. In this case, we can use this room as, so for the purpose of a meeting room, or as a break room. So this shows the different functions or the different purposes. So we can use as in this way to express our roles, our jobs, and the ways that we use different things. Okay, so with this in mind, let's continue to use number 2, which is quite different. Use number 2 is as to mean while or to mean at the same time. So in this case, we have 2 things occurring at about the same point in time, and we want to express that. So, first example here. They arrived as we were leaving. So, these two actions are they arrived, past tense, as we were leaving. So, this means maybe we're in the process, or we were in the process of leaving. We were still there, but we were just about to go. So we connect these with as to show that these two situations or these two actions happened at about the same time. So we can think of this as kind of like while or at the same time. Let's look at the second example. The fire alarm started ringing as we sat down in the restaurant. The fire alarm started ringing as we sat down in the restaurant. So again, we're showing two actions happening at about the same time. So the fire alarm started ringing at the same time as we sat down at the restaurant. So we use as to do this. Please note we cannot replace as with while here. For example, the fire alarm started ringing while we sat down in the restaurant. We wouldn't use it in this way. While we tend to use with progressive actions that are happening at the same time. So we tend to use while when we talk about two continuing actions happening at the same time. We're seeing in these situations, in these cases, we have a simple past tense action and a progressive action. Same thing here, a simple past tense action and a progressive action. So we don't use as and while in exactly the same way, but they do communicate the same feeling of two things happening at about the same time. Okay, let's look at the last example. She smiled as she walked across the stage. She smiled as she walked across the stage. So in this case, we have, again, a simple past tense action. And in this one, the second part, we also have a simple past tense action. So in this sentence, we might hear some people using while in place of as in she smiled while she walked across the stage. That's because these parts match in terms of the grammar, in terms of the tense used. But me personally, I think I would probably still use as in this case instead of while, because while sounds a little more natural if we use it with the continuous or the progressive form. So for example, she was smiling while she was walking across the stage. Might sound a little bit more natural. But in this case, I would use as to mean these two things happened at the same time. Okay, great. So we have our first two uses showing the role of someone or the purpose of something. And we have two things happening about the same time, or the two things happened at about the same time. Let's go to use number 3 now. So use number 3 is to express a cause and a result. So in this use, we are connecting some kind of action and that expresses the cause of something. And then we also see the outcome or the result of that thing. I want to note that this use is a little bit formal. It may even sound a little bit old-fashioned, but we do still use it from time to time, so it's important to understand this use. So let's look at the examples. First, he went to bed early as he had an important meeting in the morning. He went to bed early as he had an important meeting in the morning. So here we have our two independent ideas. He went to bed early, one, this is the action, as he had an important meeting in the morning. This is the cause of this result, okay? So we have the reason for something. You can think of this as in the same way as because, right? He went to bed early because he had an important meeting in the morning. So typically in today's English, we use because a lot in this position. But every once in a while, we maybe want to sound a little more formal or a little old-fashioned. Every once in a while, we use as to express the same idea. Again, we have this cause and result relationship. Let's look at the next example. She prepared a mountain of food as she was expecting many guests at her party. She prepared a mountain of food as she was expecting many guests at her party. So again, we have this cause-result relationship. She prepared a mountain of food. This is the result, the outcome. And why? She was expecting many guests at her party. This is the cause. So again, we can think of this as meaning because. She prepared a lot of food because she was expecting a lot of guests at her party. So as expresses the same idea. Okay, let's look at the last example for this group. They decided to move to a bigger house as they were planning to have a family. They decided to move to a bigger house as they were planning to have a family. So again, we have this result and the cause. So again, we have this because type meaning here. They decided to move to a bigger house because they were planning to have a family. So again, although we use because a lot more in today's English, sometimes people still choose to use this as to connect their ideas that express the cause and the result of something. So it's good to know this one. Okay, great. Let's continue to number 4. Number 4 is very interesting. We use this use of as to express two changes happening at the same time. So this is a bit different from point number 2. I talked about two things that happen at about the same time, two separate actions. The key here with number 4, though, is that two things are changing at the same time. For example, two things are increasing or two things are decreasing, or maybe one thing is increasing and the other thing is decreasing at the same time. The key with this use is change, and we'll also see there are some specific grammar patterns we tend to use with this type of as. So let's take a look. First one. As you get older, it gets harder and harder to lose weight. As you get older, it gets harder and harder to lose weight. So this is expressing as you get older, so as your age increases. We are talking about one change here. And then it gets harder and harder. So it gets more and more difficult. It becomes more and more difficult to lose weight. So the difficulty increases. So we're talking about one point, increasing in age as you get older, and the other thing, trying to lose weight or getting more and more difficult to lose weight. So we're expressing two changes happening at the same time. We also see this as something, something, comma, it gets comparative, comparative. This is another common pattern that we see with this type of as use. We'll see another example in number 2 here. So let's read it. The air got colder and colder as we climbed up the mountain. The air got colder and colder as we climbed up the mountain. So again, we have two things changing. One, the air gets colder and colder. So it means the air is becoming cold, right? We do this repetition for emphasis. The air got colder and colder is thing 1, changing. 2, as we climbed up the mountain. So we are going up the mountain, climbing up the mountain. These two things, these two changes are happening at the same time. We express this, we connect these ideas with and. So this sentence follows the same kind of pattern as the first one, but we can move this as section to the end of the sentence. In this case, I could say, as we climbed up the mountain, the air got colder and colder, and it's still 100% correct. It's up to you to choose which part you want to emphasize. Generally, the part at the beginning of the sentence is going to sound like it has a little bit more emphasis. So you can choose which position is best for you. Okay, let's look at one more example. As airline ticket costs increase, the number of people traveling decreases. So again, we have two things changing here. As airline ticket costs increase, as they go up, the number of people traveling decreases. So in this case, we have changes in two directions. Costs increase, travelers decrease. The number of travelers decrease. We express that these two changes are happening at the same time with this as pattern. So a good way to know that this is the one that's being used is that this as will come at the beginning of this sentence as an introductory clause, like this as something something, comma, that's a good hint, plus this comparative form, harder and harder or colder and colder. That's one big hint that this is the changes at the same time kind of as. So keep in mind that this one, again, is used to express changes happening at the same time. The one we talked about in number 2 expresses two actions that happened sometimes in the past, or sometimes they happened or they were happening at the same time, but not just changes. So that's the key difference between 2 and 4. Okay, great. So let's continue to the last 2 points. The last 2 points are some basic grammar review points. So number 5, we use as for comparison. So this is a very basic English grammar point, but let's review it very quickly because sometimes people, I think, forget parts of these sentences. So we use as in a couple of different patterns. We use as to express that two things are equal with this pattern. So noun A is as adjective or sometimes adverb as noun B, right? So this thing is as something, as noun B. Or we can also express a comparison with a negative, not as something, okay? So A is not as adjective as B, for example. So we use this as pattern to describe things that are equal and to make some comparisons. So let's review with a couple of examples. First, your house is as big as a celebrity's house. Your house is as big as a celebrity's house. So that's like saying your house is the same size as a celebrity's house. Maybe it's really big, right? So the problem sometimes we see, I think maybe learners get a little bit confused about as and than, right? So we use than a lot when we make comparisons, like your house is bigger than my house, for example. But when we want to show that two things are equal, we use this as around our adjective, no than here, okay? So use this to express that two things are equal. Noun 1, your house. Noun 2, celebrity's house. Connect them to show they are equal with as big as, okay? Great. Let's look at a couple more examples. First, or second rather, this taco shop is not as good as the one in our neighborhood. So this is a negative, right? This taco shop is not as good as the one in our neighborhood. So in this sentence, this taco shop here, not as good, lower quality than the taco shop in our neighborhood, right? We show this relationship with not as good as, okay? Again, we have as on both sides of the adjective here. We do not use than in this sentence. Okay, let's look at our last example. The weather today is not as bad as it was yesterday. The weather today is not as bad as it was yesterday. Again, this means today's weather is not as bad as it was yesterday. So another way to express this, yesterday's weather was really, really terrible. Today's is okay. So again, we're following the adjective with as here. So as on both sides. So keep in mind that this is a very common pattern for as. Okay, let's finish off this lesson with point number 6. So point number 6, I wanted to focus on this expression, as long as, because I think it's sometimes very confusing. What does this mean? Does this have to do with length? Sometimes, yes, we can use this in this pattern actually, like this marker is as long as that marker, which means they are of equal length. However, we have this as long as expression, which means only if. It acts as part of a conditional expression. So let's look at some examples of this. First, as long as I save money for 6 months, I'll be able to buy a car this year. As long as I save money for 6 months, I'll be able to buy a car this year. So what does this mean? As long as I save money for 6 months. So we can understand this as only if. Only if I save money for 6 months, I'll be able to buy a car this year. That means I must do this thing. I must do this thing in the as long as clause in order to make this thing possible, okay? In order to make this main clause possible. I'll be able to do this thing, okay? So we use as long as to mean only in this case, all right? So you'll notice this comes at the beginning of the sentence, at least if this clause is first. Okay, so let's take a look at another position that we see as long as used in. 2, you can go to the party as long as you finish your homework. You can go to the party as long as you finish your homework. So in this case, we have our main clause here. You can go to the party as long as, or only if, you finish your homework. So this is something a parent might say to a child, right? So again, only if you finish your homework. That's what as long as expresses here. All right, let's finish up the last example sentence. We'll arrive at the airport on time as long as there's no traffic. Okay, once more. We'll arrive at the airport on time as long as there's no traffic. So again, we can replace as long as with only if to understand this. We'll arrive at the airport on time only if there's no traffic, right? Only in this situation or only if this is true, right? So this is the use of as long as. We understand this as only if, and I hope that this helps you to see the different positions in the sentence that as long as takes in comparison to the comparative form of as long as. So pay attention to the location of as long as to help you understand whether it's a comparison or it's an only if construction. Okay, great. So those are 6 different ways to use the word as. They are very different. There are many very different uses of as, but I hope that this lesson gave you a good introduction to the various ways that we can put as into our sentences. So of course, if you have any questions or comments, or if you want to practice making some example sentences with the word as, please feel free to do so in the comment section of this video. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to check us out at EnglishClass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. Thanks very much for watching this lesson, and I will see you again next time. Bye! Hi everybody, my name is Alicia. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to make embedded questions in English. Let's get started. First, let's take a look at what an embedded question even is. What is an embedded question? An embedded question is a question inside another question or inside a sentence. Embedded questions are used to make questions softer or more polite. So in this lesson, I'm going to compare embedded questions, questions that are inside something else, with direct questions. So we can see how we need to change the questions in order to make this inside type of question. So let's start by making these 2 sets. So the first one is this direct question set. So here are some samples of just very, very basic direct questions. What time does the bus leave? What time does the bus leave? Very basic question, information question, right? Or who ate my sandwich? Who ate my sandwich? Again, very simple, basic question. One more, what is the password? What is the password? These are simple, basic, direct questions. Then let's compare this to embedded questions. So let's change these direct questions and put them inside another question or another statement. And let's take a look at what happens to the questions when we do this. So the first direct question was, what time does the bus leave? In an embedded question, for example, we could say, can you tell me what time the bus leaves? Can you tell me what time the bus leaves? So you can see this question, what time the bus leaves, is different from the direct question. What time does the bus leave? We have different word order and different words used here. We're going to talk about why this is in the middle of today's lesson. Let's look for the time being at the second example though. Who ate my sandwich in this direct form? And in the embedded form, do you know who ate my sandwich? Do you know who ate my sandwich? So here we have do you know to introduce the embedded question. And in this case, we have who ate my sandwich. No change. There's a reason for this as well. We'll talk about later. Lastly, what is the password? What is the password? In an embedded question, it might look like this. I'd like to know what the password is. I'd like to know what the password is. So again, this part, the question, what the password is, this is different from what is the password. So we're going to break down the reasons for these changes and introduce the rules so that you can make your own embedded questions. First, let's start by looking at this type of sentence. What is the password? This is an example of a direct question that uses the verb be. So to be, meaning is, or are, or was, or were. When you have a question that uses the be verb, we need to follow a certain type of rule. And that is, we move the be verb after the subject when we make an embedded question. So for example, when we saw, what is the password? We needed to change that in our embedded question. So the verb comes after the subject. This is what we see here. I'd like to know what the password is. So in this case, the verb comes after the subject, the password. This is the same rule we need to follow for other questions that use the be verb. So let's take a look at 3 more examples. First, where are the car keys? Where are the car keys? Here is my be verb. So we need to move this after the subject to create an embedded question. Here's my sample. Can you tell me where the car keys are? So here is my embedded question. I'm starting the question, can you tell me? And the basic question is here, the direct question is here with the new grammar. Can you tell me where the car keys are? So a very common mistake is learners don't move the be verb to the end or to after the subject. Can you tell me where are the car keys is incorrect. Make sure to move it to the after point, the after subject point. Okay, let's look at the next example. How long is the movie? How long is the movie? Here the be verb is. So we need to move this after the subject. Here's our sample embedded question with this grammar. Do you know how long the movie is? Do you know? Introduces the embedded question. How long the movie is. Again, we moved is from this position before the subject to this position after the subject. One more example of this. Why is the city so polluted? Why is the city so polluted? Polluted means it's filled with maybe dirt, trash, it's poor quality air, and so on. So why is the city so polluted? Again, we have this be verb here, and here's our subject, the city. So here's a sample embedded question. I wonder why the city is so polluted. I wonder why the city is so polluted. So please note, we don't move the be verb always to the end of the sentence. We move it after the subject, like we see here. The city is our subject, so we put it after the subject in this position. I wonder why the city is so polluted. Also, another thing that's important to note that you can see here is that although these are called embedded questions because there's a question inside something else, we don't always need to use a question mark at the end. In this case and in this case, we're asking a question, right? Can you tell me? And do you know? But this one, I wonder. It's like we're thinking about something. I wonder why. This is not a question, so we use a period at the end of this. So keep this in mind. Sometimes it's a question, and we should use a question mark. Sometimes it's not, so just use a period, or maybe an exclamation point. Okay, great. So this is our first point about be embedded questions that use be. Now, let's take a look at another thing we need to consider. That's when our question uses the auxiliary or the helping verb do. So we saw an example of this here. What time does the bus leave? We saw this here. Here's my verb, our auxiliary does. We changed this to, can you tell me what time the bus leaves? So in this part, you might notice there's no does, right? Why is that? That's because of an interesting rule we need to consider. So in these cases, we remove that do or does or did, and we use the verb, the other verb that's in the question. So what does this look like? Here are a couple of quick examples. Our direct question, where did he go? Where did he go? In this case, we have past tense, yeah? Did, right? And our verb here is go, right? So to follow this rule, we need to remove this auxiliary, this helping word, and we use the verb that's in the question instead. We also need to make sure this change uses the same tense as the original helping verb. So what does this look like? Here's a sample. Do you know where he went? Do you know where he went? So do you know introduces the question. Where he went. We use went because it's the past tense form of the verb that was in the question before. We have no did here. So not do you know where did he went? Incorrect. That's a very common type of mistake I see with learners. Do you know where he went? It's the perfect way to create this type of embedded question. Let's look at one more example. What time does she start work? What time does she start work? So again, we have does here, does, all right? So we need to remove that, and we have this start in this case. We have the verb start. So what's a sample sentence here? I'm not sure what time she starts work. I'm not sure what time, so we have this part, remains the same, what time she starts work. So we have our verb here, matching the tense of the sentence. In this case, this is a present tense sentence, right? So we have the present tense verb structure applied. She starts work. right? So keep in mind, we always have to use the same tense that does is used in the original question, but we have to remove that does and use that tense for the verb that's actually in the sentence. So this one can be a little bit tricky to remember. It's kind of a special grammar point, but this is how we use the do verb rule with embedded questions. Okay, great. So one more quick point about this is if you have a question like this, who ate my sandwich? There's no be verb and there's no do verb. Lucky you, there's no change. So who ate my sandwich? A question like this that doesn't have this verb or this verb doesn't require any change. We can simply use it in the embedded question as it is. Who ate my sandwich? Can be put into the embedded question with no changes. So that's the one that's easy to remember. So be and do questions are the ones you really need to think about. Okay, great. Let's move on to the last part for this lesson. Yes or no questions. So sometimes we have questions that don't have a question word, like who, what, where, when, how long, and so on. These are simple yes or no questions. So if there is no question word in the sentence, you can create the embedded question with whether or if. So if or whether. We start the embedded question with that. So what does that look like? Let's take a look at some very simple examples. Here, are they hungry? Or was he angry? Or is this vegetarian? So none of these have a who, what, where, when, why question, right? Simple yes, no. So how do we make an embedded question with these? First one, are they hungry? Okay, here's a sample question. Let's ask if they're hungry. Let's ask if they're hungry. This is our embedded question. If they are hungry. Yeah? Okay, next one. Was he angry? Was he angry? Do you know if he was angry? Do you know if he was angry? If he was angry, okay? And the third one, is this vegetarian? So meaning, is this food vegetarian? Could you tell me, introduces the question, could you tell me if this is vegetarian? Could you tell me if this is vegetarian? Oh, yes it is, or no it isn't. So keep in mind we can use whether or if, but generally if tends to sound a little bit more casual, a little bit more commonly used in everyday conversation. You may hear people using whether in this position too. Another point to consider, you might have noticed that we changed the be verb position here as well, yeah? So for example, are they hungry becomes they are hungry. And was he angry becomes he was angry, right? So we still have to change the position of the be verb here. And we add this if or whether before the embedded question, okay? So this is another important grammar point to keep in mind. With practice, it becomes easier. And there are some embedded questions that are very, very common. For example, could you tell me where the restroom is? There are some that you will use a lot and they will become easier over time. So the very last point that I want to make is about these starting phrases here. So these starting phrases we've looked at in today's lesson. These are some examples of phrases we very commonly use to begin our embedded questions. So for example, do you know? We looked at this earlier many times. Do you know something? Or can or could you tell me? Can you tell me or could you tell me? Could will sound a little bit more polite. Let's ask, or let's find out, or let's see. We can use these as well. We saw this here. Let's ask if they're hungry, or let's find out if they're hungry. Let's see if they're hungry. So this is suggesting, let us do this thing. We want to find out some information. The next one is, I wonder, I wonder. We saw this here. I wonder why the city is so polluted. So we can use this to kind of think out loud. And the last two, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We saw this here. I'm not sure what time she starts work. So we can use this to express some uncertainty. And the last one, I'd like to know. I'd like to know. So when you want to politely request information, I'd like to know what time the bus leaves, and so on. So these are just some examples. There are some more as well, but these are very, very common. So, I hope that this lesson helped you understand what embedded questions are, why we use them to sound a little bit more polite or to sound a little bit less direct, and I hope that you are able to make your own embedded questions following the rules we talked about in this lesson. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, or if you want to practice making some sentences with this grammar, please feel free to do so in the comment section of this video. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Also, check us out at EnglishClass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. Thanks very much for watching this lesson, and I will see you again soon. Bye!
Want to boost your vocabulary so you can speak more of the language? If you're a beginner, the best way is to focus only on a special set of words, the core words, and you'll see why in just a bit. But first, if you don't yet have access to our language learning system, sign up for a free lifetime account right now. Just click the link in the description to get your free lifetime account. What are core words? So imagine this. You're a beginner. You download a vocabulary app and it starts teaching you words like economics, xylophone, and zebra. If you're a beginner, these are not exactly useful words, right? Well, that's the exact opposite of what core words are. And that's just an example of how to learn vocab the wrong way. So if you see an app teaching you that, run far, far away. Core words are a special set of words all beginners should start with. They're words we use most in daily life. Words like I, you, yes, no, this and that. And this is where you should start learning vocab as a beginner. The top 100 core words make up about 50% of everyday conversations. The top 200 core words cover 60 to 70%. If you go to 300, that's 80% of everyday conversations. So if you start with the core words first, instead of learning random words, you'll start understanding everyday conversations sooner than later. Even if you don't understand everything and you can only pick out a few words, you're on the right track. So how do you get started learning the core words? How to get the core 100 words. This part is for people that are using our learning system. With our system, you get the core 100 words for free. Just head to the vocabulary menu on our site and click on 100 most common words. And the way it works is you get all the words up front. Each word comes with a picture, the translation, audio pronunciation, and sample sentences so you can get a feel for it. And this is where you start. All the words are here. So if you're not a member, just sign up for a free lifetime account to get access. Now, how do you actually learn the words? You don't have to memorize them. There are easier ways. The easiest way to learn the core 100 words. The easiest way is with our audio slideshow tool, and it's also free for everyone. You'll find this tool right there with the core 100 words. Just click on View Slideshow, and the audio slideshow will play the words on loop for as long as you want it to, until the words are stuck in your brain. You can switch the translation audio on or off and play it in the background while you're doing something else. If there are certain words you want to focus on later, you can send them to your word bank to review later. You can also pop them into our spaced repetition flashcards to really master them. Just select all words, hit Add All Words, then choose your flashcard deck. But the audio slideshow is the easiest way because you can play the words on loop in the background until you know them in and out. And you can easily start understanding everyday conversations just by starting with the first 100 core words. So if you want to learn the language and get access to these learning tools and our learning system, sign up for a free lifetime account right now. Just click the link in the description to get your free lifetime account. Now that you're finished with this lesson, don't forget, as a free bonus, you get over 30 conversation cheat sheets, but only if you sign up via the link in the description. You'll learn how to have flowing conversations and how to answer the most common questions. You can also print out these colorful cheat sheets to keep as physical study material. So don't miss out on this free gift. Click the link in the description and sign up for a free lifetime account to get your PDF cheat sheets.